You just need to admit the fact that you're going bald and just embrace it. And I'm like, okay.
You look like the villain from Mega Man.
Yeah, he does. All right, hi guys.
I'm on.
Hey.
All right, well guys, thank you for joining me. I am here with Andy Kilcoyne, Kevin Van Cleve, and Shane Tackleberg. And so guys, I just really appreciate you joining us. Tanner and I feel honored that you guys would take time out of your day to spend some time talking about nonsense. And so I think we've got all the laughing not out of the way, but we'll see how this goes. So can you guys just quickly introduce yourselves, and we'll start there. So Andy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, Andy Kilcoyne, Director of Operations at Kelly Moss.
So Kevin, how about you? Who are you?
Hey, my name is Kevin Van Cleve. I own KSV Looms. I manufacture mil-spec motorsport looms.
All right, Shane.
Shane Tecklenburg, ST Consulting. I do race car electronics consulting and engine calibration.
All right. And Tanner, tell them who you are.
Tanner Gibbs, VP of Marketing and Project Development.
So guys, I appreciate you joining us. And so let's get down to the brass tacks of things. We're all car guys. We love cars. We eat, breathe, sleep them. And I would say there's probably only a few things I love more than cars. But it ranks up there. And I've loved cars since I could begin. And that always brings me to the point, I'm curious from you guys. You guys have worked on all different types of things. And before we get to really too many of the questions, I want to ask you guys, in the last year, what is the most interesting project you've worked on or are working on? So why don't we kick it over to Kevin first?
I enjoyed your car, to be honest. It was one of the most interesting things, and Pike's Peak was always something that I've been interested in for a long time, ever since, I guess playing Gran Turismo and seeing like the Suzuki Scudo.
Yep.
And like then sort of researching it from there. So like actually going to Pike's Peak with you with Porsche was probably the most interesting thing I did last year. For me personally, I mean, all the cars are neat because, working with Shane quite a bit, you see a wide variety of drag racing cars and cars that make huge horsepower and run insane amounts of boost. But, it was really nice to see a car. I was also quite involved with your car for my month of servitude at Kelly Moss.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Kevin lived in Bernice for a month. I think he said he'd be there a week, and 6 weeks later, we were headed to Pike's Peak. So, Shane, how about you? Your last year, I know you've been involved with some pretty unique projects as well. How about you? What would be your answer?
Yeah, I think I would mirror what Kevin says. I mean, I get to work on a lot of really cool and interesting projects in all different genres of racing. But specifically last year was a big year for me because it was the first year that I went and ran NHRA Pro Mod, and that was awesome. But it's close enough to what I've always done that it's not a big departure. It's just a different kind of racing venue.
Right.
Your car it wasn't just your car. It was Pikes Peak. I always wanted to go to Pikes Peak, like Kevin said, for the technical challenge of it as an engine calibrator. And, working with the physics involved in how an engine operates at different altitudes and so forth, until you've actually been there and done that, everything's just a mathematical equation. And, if you stay in a relatively small variation of altitudes, you're not really sure if it's working like it's supposed to or not. I mean, it runs like it's supposed to, but obviously when you go to the extremes, that's when you start to, realize that, yeah, it actually works everywhere. But Pikes Peak, I always wanted to go, but I never wanted to go. The more successful you get, the less you want to go enter into something new and look like an idiot. So I've had a few chances to go. None of them were really what I wanted it to be, but your car was, even though it was a rush. But I mean, honestly, when those guys called me and said, hey, we want to do it, I'm like, nah, man, there's not enough time. And here's the only way I'll do it. And they went like, okay. So that made it easy. I just love it now. I mean, I think that was for sure the highlight of my year last year. And like I said, I did a lot of cool stuff last year and worked on a lot of cool cars, but it's all the same stuff I've done for years before that too. So it wasn't a big departure. Pikes Peak was with your car last year, first time, and it was awesome. And I can't wait to go back.
Well, first of all, guys, you don't have to say that because I'm the one interviewing you. But I do feel honored you feel that way.
It's because you paid us. You paid us to say that.
You're not, Andy, you're supposed to say that after your turn.
Sorry.
No, that's super humbling. Andy, how about you, man?
Not to sound like a broken record, but I have to very much mirror what Kevin and Shane said. I mean, Pike Peak's always been kind of a passion project for me. It's definitely a bucket list type of event. When we went at it at a pretty intense level in a very short amount of time last year, and I think we should all be proud of what we were able to accomplish. I mean, it was a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah. One is I feel super honored that all three of you chose to be part of it. Andy, and for taking on the build. Really like you guys, it was always kind of it was a bucket list item for me. We know that. And this today looks a lot different than it did a year ago for me physically. We're making advances on the cancer. But you guys crafted a car that is spectacular. And hands down, we know it was a good car. We know the limiting factor, in all honesty, was the driver.
So look, the thing for me, there's more to it than just the challenge. But like so I get to work with lots of different teams in all kinds of racing, right? And all different levels. And there's been a few, very few, that I would say would be super teams from the standpoint that the team has no real internal ego or friction. It's like everybody knows their point or their place. They know what their expertise level is. And they focus on that, and they know the other people are there also experts, and they let them focus on those things. Yeah. So there's been only a few teams that I've worked with that are like that, and these guys are part of that team. When I work with Andy and Kelly Moss, and I work with Kevin, there's no arguing. It's like, look, we need to do this. Okay, bang, that just happens.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't hear that often. I talk to a lot of race teams, a lot of people in the racing industry, and I think you three are probably the first that would echo that. And it is tough. And I've been around racing, and we've all seen it in the pits, right? Crew team members going at each other, throwing wrenches, beating on each other, walking away. Never had an issue. And let's face it, I mean, I'm going to be honest. It's like I tell my wife, I miss those guys. I tell her all the time, I'm lucky enough I get to see Andy semi-regularly. But, I really do miss you guys. I don't miss the bill.
Miss you too, buddy.
Guys, seriously, I mean, Andy was the first guy on the list for Pikes Peak. I've known Andy for years and, followed him. And when it looked like I got some funds to get a car together, he was the first call I made. And there's a few reasons for that. One is I knew Andy's heart. I knew him from working, from dealing with him at Arns, and then, his family. I knew his pedigree. But also the success he's had with Kelly Moss. I mean, let's face it, what he built that business into has been pretty incredible. But to do it right, and when he was telling me the story about Kevin and Shane, I'm like, okay, if Andy's highly recommending these guys, I'm pretty excited. I'm curious, how did you end up meeting Kevin and Shane?
Shane had done, a lot of work with Level 5, which was another team that ran out of the Kelly Moss facility here, and had worked with Jeff previously. And Kevin, I'm trying to I know that, yeah, definitely from Shane, but I was trying to remember what our first project was. It was
Rushinsky 996 turbo.
Yeah, engine harness and electronics. And
yeah, this whole time I thought it was Grinder.
Yeah, and then we did the Mark Wyman project on that 993 RSR 4-liter conversion, which was definitely one of the more challenging things that I've ever been involved with. And I think you probably echo that in a sentiment, because it was a lot of figuring out how Porsche did their roadmap, because they weren't willing to divulge anything.
It was reverse engineering a 997 RSR and packaging it in a 993.
Yep. So that was a big one, and we've done a handful of other car harnesses and full harnesses and stuff. And both Kevin and Shane are, people to partner with, because, I love the no BS approach, and this is the way we have to do it. This is the way it has to be done right. I believe in culture. I believe in surrounding yourself with people that, elevate you in your program. Working with like-minded people with common goals, I think is just always, whether it's in motorsports or any type of team sport or business, really. I mean, it's just trying to surround yourself with, people to help you elevate your game, whatever that is.
Yeah. And obviously it was I feel a really good recipe here with the three of you. Working towards Bernice and what we did, I still heartbroken about how it ended, but man, I can't help but look back now and say, boy, I could have easily underestimated what you guys did, but just huge. And then this year, even better. I'm I'm so excited about what you guys have dreamed up this year. So the next question I want to ask you guys is, what got it started for you with cars? I mean, I know for me, like, my story is, my mom said I was 2.5. When I told her the story of the first car I remember seeing and how it impacted me, she's like, there's no way you can remember that. And I told her everything about it. She's like, you were like 2.5. And what it was a 68 Ford Mustang. And I can remember it was a beautiful Mustang. Sounded amazing. I just remember standing in the yard with a plastic toy car and watching this Mustang go by, and I just thought, that thing is bad. It was just awesome. Shane, let's start with you. I mean, what was it that got it started for you?
Mine was probably predetermined. My dad was into cars since he was a kid. Since he was 10 or 12 years old, and he became an auto shop teacher, and he owned an automotive repair business and owned an automotive parts business. And when I was born, he was teaching high school auto shop and had a auto repair business on the side and was building a 32 Roadster in the garage. So I don't know, from the time I was old enough to walk, I would go out in the garage with him and, take his tools out of the toolbox and put them all back in the wrong drawer, and, use his files to try and saw the leg of his friggin' wood bench down. So, just things kids do. But when I got older, he'd tell me, hey, go get the 5/8, and I'd go dig through the thing and find the 5/8 and that kind of. So from a very young age, I was immediately immersed into the car culture, basically through my dad. I mean, I don't think he pushed me that direction at all, but I didn't need a push. I wanted to be out there in the garage with him as soon as I was old enough to go out there.
So did that 32 make an impression on you? I mean, do you have a soft spot for 32s now?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. He never finished the thing, actually. Ended up selling it before he finished it, but it was, no doubt. I mean, I appreciated 32 Roadster because he was building one, and, I like all cars. But that was I think that was probably the formative moment, or the formative age, which again would have been like as soon as I could walk, really. I mean, so probably 3 years old, maybe 2.5 years old, going out in the garage. But later in life, I became interested in engines, and I just never steered away from cars. I mean, I did bicycles for a while when I was probably from 10 to 14. And then I started playing around with engines again. And then the year I was 14, my dad had a business doing automotive diagnostics over the telephone that he started in 1984.
Oh, wow.
So he started a hotline service for car repair mechanics, because computers came out on cars in 1980 to meet the federal emission standards. And by 83, 84, they were in the aftermarket. And there was no information available on how to work on them, how to fix them. And he thought, back when I had my shop in the 70s, we worked on a lot of Fords, Chryslers, and Chevrolets. But if a Nissan would have been a Datsun then, or a Toyota came in, we'd go call our buddy down the street that specialized in those and go, hey, what happens to these things when they won't start? What do I need to replace? So I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a company that everyone could call that would track that information on a computer, and they'd be able to help you if you got something you didn't know how to work on? So as an aside to that, next door to that business, he had a small little workshop. It had, bench grinder and drill press and a lathe and welder and that stuff in it. when I turned 14, the summer that I was 14, I started going with them to the shop every day. Now I would go next door into the workshop, and I built a go-kart. So I went and got a lawnmower engine, and from the swap meet. Actually, I bought a kit. Someone had taken apart a mini bike. So I bought the mini bike, turned that into a go-kart, eventually put a supercharger on it, couldn't get the carburetor to work. One of the guys that worked for my dad told me about electronic fuel injection and told me how it worked and said we could make something real quick that afternoon that would run it way better. And it took like 2 years worth of monkeying with that to get it to work right. By then I wasn't even interested in that go-kart anymore. I mean, it's just cycling over and over and over again. So, but yeah, I was always going to be involved with cars in some way. I mean, so I went to work for my dad's business. After high school, I went to college for a little while. Part of what my dad was doing was he was also involved with ROP, Regional Occupational Program, and right in the early '90s they had shut down all the aerospace stuff here in Southern California. So you had literally rocket scientists from Hughes Aircraft, from Rockwell, from Boeing, every major manufacturer. There was this huge surplus of really smart people, but they didn't have jobs because there wasn't an industry anymore. So they're retraining the ones that wanted to be into auto mechanics. And my dad was part of that program, and he basically said, hey, I can get you in this if you want, and you can go actually learn really how cars work. And I'm like, no, maybe I don't want to, I'm not sure I really want to have anything to do with cars. And he's like, okay. So that would have been, let's just say that was like Tuesday. So Thursday he came to me and said, you're quitting college tomorrow and you're going to this class, whether you like it or not. And I never went to any kind of schooling that was so exciting. I couldn't wait to get back in the morning to learn more. And literally I was learning alongside rocket scientists, which was awesome. And that just pointed me completely in the direction of cars. When I went and worked in a shop for 2 years, and then I got smart enough doing that. My dad eventually was able to hire me at his business to do diagnostics over the telephone, like he was doing for many companies at that point. And I worked there, and it was sold to Snap-on, and I quit working there in 2001. And I went, and actually it was my dad again that said, hey, look, instead of going to working on street cars at a local shop, why don't you go over to Motec? I mean, we were in the same business park as Motec, so we knew who they were. So he said, why don't you go to Motec and see if they need somebody? So I did. I went over there and I begged and pleaded for a job for 6 or 8 weeks. They finally hired me. And I guess the rest is history, because that's where I really ended up changing trajectory into the racing market.
Wow. I didn't realize you had come from such a steep background.
Yeah, so I mean, I was obviously going to have something to do with cars. I'm never not going to have something to do with cars. But the only thing that changed was once I started working at Motec and working on the best money can buy race cars, it completely spoiled me for wanting to work on my own crap. All that time when I was working for my dad during the day, I would work for my dad during the day, go to our workshop at night. I had borrowed a flow bench, so I poured it at about 100 cylinder heads and ground cylinder heads and mostly screwed them all up, but you learn a lot by trial and error.
Yep.
So I did that. I built engines. I took the engines to the dyno and ran them on the dyno. I bought superchargers and put them on my street. My Chevelle had a 400 small block with a B&M street blower on it. I dynoed it, made about 560 horsepower, which is pretty good back then. So I was trying, and I worked on a few drag race cars because I had friends that worked on those cars, and I went with them. And drag racing sort of was my first passion as far as racing goes. I got introduced to all these other genres when I went to work at Motec because that's what they did. They hardly did any drag racing at all, actually. I was about the only guy there that had anything to do with drag racing.
Right.
So, yeah, it wasn't just something I decided to do one day. I mean, other than maybe the day I was born, but I didn't know I was deciding.
So, Andy, how about you? What was that moment? I mean, obviously I know some of your past, but, do you remember? I mean, I know for you, probably some of it was just what you were steeped in. But what about it?
Yeah, I mean, I basically grew up in an engine machine shop. My dad raced Pro Fords, Pro Formula Ford back in the 70s. So some of the first, cars and pictures I remember seeing in the workshop, he had a 342 Lola was kind of the beginning of his racing. And, anything from tractor pulling engines and, being at tractor pulls to, my dad had a 68 Camaro that they drag raced, and, just a handful of, different type of projects like that. But, my older brother got back into he was in a Fox Body Mustangs, and he had did autocross, and then eventually transitioned into doing some road racing stuff, and they bought a Formula Ford again, and then that kind of fueled a passion for me. So I was involved in open wheel racing for a large chunk of my life before coming over to the dark side of the Porsche world. But yeah, I spent a lot of time, in and out of auto repair facilities and dealerships and parts stores, and kind of shaped me into the Neanderthal I am today.
Kevin, how about you?
Well, my father hated cars.
I remember you telling me that.
But my dad he writes the process controls that go into making paint. He worked for EI DuPont, and it was Ford before then. And he was constantly working on something in the basement, whether it was building cabinets for the house or, you name it. It was always something getting built or something being repaired. And, I came from a lower middle class family where, you didn't have someone come into the house to fix something. You did it yourself. The car stuff, though, my dad refused to do that. He just hated it. And when I got into it kind of late, I was always into cars and trucks and vehicles and machines and, that kind of stuff from a very young age. And I was always working on stuff. My dad said that when I was a kid that everything, from my height down was taken apart. You walk up to, heater vent, and all the screws were missing from it. All the plug sockets were missing, and, I just take everything apart. But I turned 18 and graduated high school. My first car I had was a Thunderbird that belonged to my father that I wrecked. And he still made me buy it off of him. I drove that around Brooklyn. So I decided I was going to buy a Mustang.
Yeah.
And I bought a 93 Mustang in 1994 and proceeded to pay way more in insurance than I ever thought possible. So I sold that, and I bought a turbocharged Eclipse. And that's where I really started playing with cars. And that was what got me into it, really. And, breaking transmissions and clutches and all sorts of stuff. And from there, I went to work at a Honda dealership. And from there, I went to work for race teams. And, just so I kind of carved out a notch in what I was sort of good at. That's what I've done since then. It's I love cars and anything mechanical. You put something in front of me, I still want to take it apart to this day. It doesn't matter what it is. I want to see what's inside and figure out how it works and put it all back together.
He was working for this race team, and he's telling me what he was making, doing what he was doing for him. Like, just stop doing that and start building wiring harnesses. Just go to work for yourself.
How long did it take you, Kevin, to take that advice and move on?
At that point, I'd probably almost moved on completely. The race team I was working for, how it started, they wanted me to, like I told Andy, I'm not good working for people. I'm not a good employee. I'm best kept in isolation. But I'd already the guy I was working for, that team, he was like, I want you to build me a harness, but I don't want you to come to work for me again. And I'm like, okay. And so I'd finish up with it, and then I did this deal with Shane, and Shane's like, just go do it on your own. So I was pretty much already there. I just never look for another job again.
There you go.
And then through time, I figured out I could just, it works out better for me. It works with my personality. I got a great business partner that takes care of all the stuff that I really hate doing, like the money aspect and like an online retailing type deal.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet Teddy one day in person, because he's got to be a saint to put up with you.
Oh, I just don't ever talk to him. That's why he's got a shop in Tampa, and I got one in Sanford.
Yeah, he's on the other side of the state.
Yeah, geographically separated. That's the key.
I knew his wife is awesome and amazing because Kevin came with a warning label. There was two people that came with warning labels were Shane and Kevin from Andy and Jameson. and and everybody else at Kelly Moss. So, Andy, what was your first car? We heard Kevin's, which was funny, a broken down Trans Am, which
No, Thunderbird.
Thunderbird.
It was a Ford product.
All right. Well, I like that. It wasn't the supercharged Thunderbird by chance? Super Coupe?
My dad worked. No, it was a 5-liter.
Well, still good.
My dad worked for Ford at that point.
Yeah. How about you, Andy? What was your first car?
Yeah, I fumbled through a bunch of busted cars to try to be able to afford something that was better. So I started with a K car of all things.
Oh,
and
Lee Iacocca.
like a rotted out, nasty, non-running K car. So it was the worst of awful cars. And then went to a Ford Courier.
Oh,
to a K5 Blazer, and I think I drove that one for quite a while.
K5 Blazer. So, what happened to the K5 Blazer?
Sold it.
You did?
Sold it. Yeah, actually, that one I kind of wish I had that one back. That was a fun one. But there was, I don't know, each one was a increase in quality and price and nonsense.
Right. Yeah, that's how I kind of rolled too. Shane, what was your first car?
Okay, so mine was, the backstory is, so I was born in April. So Christmas, when I was 14, so I think it was Christmas 1988, Christmas time 1988, we had my mom had a Toyota van, and my dad had this 77 Chevy pickup truck, which we bought like in 83, whatever, big block, long bed, single cab, whatever, that he drove every day to work. And the van got stolen, like the week of Christmas, or maybe in between Christmas and New Year's. The van got stolen. No, it was before Christmas. So that's why we had to have a car, because my mom needed to go be able to buy Christmas presents. So my mom and dad quickly realized, obviously they've got nothing. My dad thumbs through the Trader magazine, whatever, and he finds a 75 Honda Civic, right? And for $500. So he goes, looks at it, it runs, boom, he gets it. My mom's driving that around during Christmas. By February, the insurance company's paid, they found the van, they fixed it, we've got the van back. So now we've got 3 cars, and I'm 15, right, coming in April. So I know we've got an extra car, so I'm not saying anything, but I kind of know. So I take this Civic. My dad starts driving the Civic, right? He parks the truck, because obviously the Civic gets way better mileage.
Right.
So he's taking the Civic to the shop, and I'm going with him, and I'm taking the Civic, and I'm washing it, and I'm waxing it, and I'm polishing it up the chrome, and I'm cleaning it up inside, and I'm doing it because I know where this Civic's probably going to go. And so my birthday, when I'm 15, here's an envelope. I could tell there's keys in it, and I open the keys up, and it's the keys to the Chevy truck. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't have a job yet, and I'm going to drive something with a big block in it back and forth to school. So my dad's like, yeah, you're going to drive that. We're going to take the thing apart. We're going to take the motor apart, rebuild the motor. You're going to do all that, transmission, drive. We're going to go through the whole thing, make sure it's nice, and you drive that to school. Oh, so that sounded like a lot more fun. So, yeah, it was a 77 GMC Sierra, 3/4 ton, big block. We put, headers and all that stuff on it. I drove that to high school. And then I sold the truck later in life. I redid it all, put new front end on it, painted it, did all that kind of stuff. Sold it to a friend, actually traded him for a GSXR 750.
Ooh.
And then I sold the GSXR, and then a couple years later, he needed to sell the truck, and my dad bought it back from him, and we still have it at our river house in Arizona.
No way.
It's still in the family.
Dude, you gotta send me a picture of that, Shane. We'll post it.
Super cool.
It
doesn't look as nice now as it looked then, but it looked pretty trick. But by the time I had it out of high school, I did the body work and paint on it and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's funny how we can look at cars differently, especially from our first cars to when we start to learn about performance, right? There's one thing about looking cool, there's another thing about performance, and sometimes they meet, right? But let's face it, any car that was performance-driven in the 80s probably wasn't very attractive. My dream car in the 80s was a Lotus. And I saved my money for a print when I was a kid. My son now has it in his room. And I was looking at it last night. I was standing on his bed. I'm like, look at this car. I said, this car, when you drove by, it looked like the future. It was just, but it was kind of ugly.
It's ugly now looking back, but not at that time. Like,
no.
think of the Countach. Everybody had that Countach poster, right? It's like, dude, that is like, and you look at it now, you're like, what are those, like 13-inch wheels? Are on it.
The second poster I bought was a Countach, and it's on his other wall.
Yeah. Everybody, that poster was everyone. That was like, oh man, that's like the future. That's like the space shuttle. That thing looks so awesome. Now you look at it, you're like, that can't be. Is that a kit car?
Right.
That don't look right.
But those cars changed styling. They really did. I mean, they changed a lot with how we looked at things. And yeah, but that was the era of hard lines and hard corners, right? And even like the Lotus, I never noticed it, but when you look at the side door, they really did. There was a belly to the inside when the front door started. There was a belly, but it was outcased with really hard lines, so you never noticed it. I looked at that car a million times and didn't notice it until recently. I'm going to tell you guys, Andy found out about my first cars, and I think he thought I was lying. Everybody seems to assume, my first car was like a Ford Mustang. Everybody's almost sure of that. I actually bought a Simca and a Dodge Simca.
I don't even know what that is.
I had to Google it too.
Yeah. So
like an Aspen?
They're uglier than an Aspen. But
I don't know if that's possible.
Here's
It's
why
like a
I bought them.
European clown car.
Yeah, think of a clown car. Yeah, Tanner's right.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
of a clown car, no grill. So I had a 60s. Actually the 30s had a grill, but it was like a 60s something Simca, and it was actually brought over as an experimental mail car. And what I wanted to do was I thought the car was cool because I thought, man, if I widened it out, I wanted to widen it out. And this is before it was popular, obviously, but I'm like, I want to widen this thing. I want to slam it down. And then I wanted to supercharge a Ford. Yeah, 2.3 liter. Now, guys, look at that car. Go back, Kevin. Don't tell me slam it down, widen it out, chop it.
Was it made in Czechoslovakia and made out of paper mache?
No, but
Who took a communist car, Don?
So what you're saying is we could make a really cool car out of it if we completely cut it apart and made it into something else.
Yes.
pretty much.
If you want a cool Dodge, you can make a cool Dodge out of that.
It'd be the only custom car in the world that they actually sectioned and put 4 feet in the middle of so you could get more than 2 people inside of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, the car was so small, but that's why they wanted it, because it had no rear seat, so it actually kind of went back in the one I had. And so they liked it because the male people could reach everywhere in the car. Like, I could sit, and you guys know I got long arms, so I mean, I could touch the other side. And so the other one was a 34, 36 Dodge Simca, but the radiator was in back. It was behind the engine.
Cool.
Yeah, so
That's good engineering.
yeah.
Yeah. Non-direct airflow.
Right, it probably works great in Europe.
Yeah.
They drive in reverse in Europe.
Well, that's because I always got towed that way.
That way they don't bash the radiator in when it won't stop and they smash the car in front of them.
Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Really quick, what's your daily driver right now? Andy?
Ford Raptor.
Yeah. Kevin?
Lexus LS 430.
Shane?
Lexus GX 470.
Wow, you guys. Yeah, Tanner loves the Lexus. And I got a Ford Raptor. But lately I've been driving the McLaren too. Tanner?
2008 470.
Well, you guys can talk about your Lexuses. Andy and I are going to go do cool things in Ford Raptor truck stuff.
No, pardon me, it's Lexi, by the way.
Lexi, sorry. And your Lexi.
Exactly.
You guys, thank you
All right,
so
fellas.
much. Guys, I love you guys. Thank you so much for believing in us and what we do. God bless you.